And for us who are gathered so far, again, we are starting on Genesis chapter 33, verse 18. But we have a while left here.
There we go. You want a piece of paper to write on?
No, just right in front.
Oh, you do with the
Yeah,
pencil?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Green Chevy. Oh, leave that in there.
Getting something to rest my arm on.
All right, we are at 6 p.m. and welcome to those of you who are here. For those who are on Facebook or seeing this later as well, welcome to all y'all. And we are again in Genesis. It's been a couple weeks. Illness, travel, bless us. And maybe it was a good time to take a break because we've just done all of those pieces with Jacob wrestling with God, re-encountering his brother. And the story takes a turn now. And so it's good to sometimes take a breath when we've seen big things and see a story that for many who read Genesis kind of over and over as a part of whatever they do, or those who think they know the story well of the Bible, it often seems surprising to them, like they have not heard it before. So we're going to encounter the story of Dinah and see things. Anyway, we'll understand more after we read it. Would anybody like to begin on Genesis chapter 33, verse 18, and just read through verse 20, finish up that chapter?
What is it? Chapter what?
Chapter 33, verse 18. And then the final three verses of chapter 33 is what we're going to begin with. And then we're going to read all of 34, but we'll go through that as we go through that. And
Well,
Yeah. Well, I can do that. After Jacob came from Padan Aram, he arrived safely at the city of Shechem in Canaan and camped within sight of the city. For 100 pieces of silver, he bought from the sons of Hamor, the father of Shechem, the plot of land where he pitched his tent. And there he set up an altar and called it El Elohi Israel.
all right. So we kind of remember where we were with Jacob. He has come back into the promised land. And so we're still in that part of the narrative. And notice what he does. He finds a place named Shechem. You'll hear that littered throughout the Old Testament, but we're not going to try to focus on that space. It's an important place in Near Eastern ancient times too, and we just get to hold on to that. So he's gone to an important place, and he camps before the city, and then he buys the place with 100 pieces of money, whatever that might mean, but he buys it. So he's essentially now owning land in the promised land. He's taken some, he's doing it. And so that's what it means to pitch his tent. He's basically made himself a home, and then he erects an altar. And if we can try to say if there's a difference between Jacob and Esau, other than it seems like Esau is a genuinely decent person and Jacob is kind of a piece of
not decent is what you mean.
Yes.
tomato, Claudia, but thank you very much. And the difference is we only see Jacob erecting altars, building spaces of worship, seeing these moments when he seems to be giving thanks to God. As opposed to, we don't see that from Esau, which doesn't mean that Esau's not doing such, but we don't see that. And he calls the place El Elohi Israel, which essentially means God, the God of Israel. And he's now using his God-given name, if you will, to represent not just him, but his family. So this is where the God of Israel, and that's what he calls the altar, and that's what he calls the space. And he's now got land. He's built an altar. He's in the promised land. Something has actually happened that seems to make a part of this promise work. Isn't it nice to finally see some of the promise come to fruition after all this time?
Yes.
So isn't it just going to work out and we're going to say they're going to happily live ever after?
No.
No, probably not, but
No,
No.
because the Bible is real. It's real about life. Even if the stories aren't like something that are literally true, they happened this way or they happened at all. It's nice that the Bible doesn't try to run away from the stark realities of a life that is often disappointing, even when you seem like you were at the brink of something that you actually had been hoping for so long. And let's see how reality is destroyed for Jacob and his family. Does anyone want to read chapter 34, verses 1 through 4?
Now Dinah, the daughter of Leah, whom she had borne to Jacob, went out to visit the daughters of the region. When Shechem, son of Hamor the Hivite, prince of the region, saw her, he seized her and lay with her by force. And his soul was drawn to Dinah, daughter of Jacob. He loved the young woman and spoke tenderly to her. So Shechem spoke to his father Hamor, saying, "Get me this girl to be my wife."
All right. Now, I should have gave us a warning perhaps before we read this. It's rough.
yes.
Yes.
It's
It seems to me, under Jewish law, they're already married.
Under Jewish law, if someone were to rape a woman, maiden, he was required to marry her, and he was never allowed any certificate of divorce. And that is one of those Old Testament laws that we can like bring up in these days and be like, what on earth is going on? In the ancient Near East, whatever our judgment might be of it, the idea of the time was so much as an honor culture in the ancient Near East. When that happens, the idea is it'll be nearly impossible to marry her off. She has borne shame, and so the law requiring the man who did that to marry her was essentially to ensure that she was taken care of and treated well afterward, which sounds to us just strange, but at the time was for justice, even if we can look back 3,000 years later and be like, that is absurd.
It's hard to comprehend because we don't have one gender that's entirely reliant on the other gender in our society.
We don't live in a patriarchal society. I mean, it's not unpatriarchal, it's just not this patriarchal.
Well, and actually, it was justice for the woman, as you say, because then she was taken care of. Otherwise, she would just be,
Shunned.
sure. Yeah.
Yes. It has never been easy being a woman.
no.
No
I
way.
can't, and I can say that, and I can say that knowing I have no idea what that means when I say it.
Sorry.
No, you don't have to be sorry. Like, this is hard.
Yeah.
And after doing this, apparently he's
We're trying to go backwards.
he's in love, which is even stranger sounding.
Right.
But we now know that law, as we brought it up, but the law hasn't come about yet. But the story is written with the law in mind a little bit. But nevertheless, here is a fellow who has done this, and now he wants to do that. And what was Dinah just trying to do when she went out?
meet some of the local ladies.
Yeah. Here's a story about a young woman who just wanted to go out and meet some other young women, and she's raped. That doesn't sound like today at all.
In a way it does.
Well, that's sadly the point.
Yeah.
Should I turn out the kitchen light?
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
It doesn't lie to us about things. And what's going to happen now, because this is an honor culture as well. Like, again, we know the Old Testament laws a little bit, and we can understand the justice behind them. But this is an honor culture where people struggle with things like this. And so let's see what a response might be. And we get to see first from Jacob. Does anyone want to read verses 5 through 7?
I will.
Thank you.
Now, Jacob heard Shechem had defiled his daughter Dinah, but his sons were with his cattle in the fields, so Jacob held his peace until they came. And Hamor, the father of Shechem, went out to Jacob to speak with him, just as the sons of Jacob came in from the field. When they heard it, the men were indignant and very angry because he had committed an outrage in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, for such a thing ought not to be done.
All right. And we're going to take this in pieces because sometimes it's just like, well, what's going on here? And what did we hear in the story as the story is taking place?
Well, Jacob wasn't going to do anything about it without the backup of the sons.
He held his peace. He did. What does Jacob say in any of those 3 verses you read, Claudia?
Nothing.
Much.
Jacob doesn't say a word. And now Shechem's father, and Shechem, by the way, means like honored one, most honored one. Just so you know, Shechem's father comes up, who apparently is like the ruler of this little area of land, and it says essentially what had happened, and that they want to have her as his wife. And Jacob's just holding the peace, or holding his own peace, that is, whatever that means. And then his sons get there. And how do his sons react?
Angry.
They're angry. Are they angry for their sister, or are they angry because of how it makes them look?
That's interesting. I would think they'd be angry because of the sister.
You think it would be that way a little bit. And they say this piece, though, with regards, when they heard of it, the men were indignant and very angry because he had committed an outrage in Israel. Notice that their outrage is what has happened in their group.
Yeah.
Their outrage is not at what happened to their sister. It's at what happens to them because of what happened to their sister.
Huh.
How it makes them look. Notice that the word used to talk about like what happened to her in verse 5 was defiled, or translated as defiled. That's the same word in Hebrew that essentially means made unclean, as in all of those legal things that we heard in Leviticus.
That would mean if she didn't get married, she'd have to go into the town and say, unclean, unclean.
Yeah, essentially, they're saying, yeah, she was made unclean. And this has been an outrage in Israel because she's been made unclean. You've basically ruined the rest of us, and such a thing ought not be done.
So are you saying that this is about him being a Gentile or something else?
No, just that it happened.
Okay.
That he's a Gentile doesn't help the matter. That kind of adds like an exponent to the outrage already. And we're going to witness how him being a Gentile is going to be utilized for how they feel about things.
It
And-
I'm sorry, sounds kind of like the Garden of Eden when the man said, the woman made me do it.
Well, Genesis is anything if not consistent in some of its motifs about the way human.
Yeah,
So now we know how they feel, but they haven't said anything yet either. But you have to imagine everyone can tell by how they look. So anyone want to read verses 8 through 12?
But Hamor spoke with them, saying, "The heart of my son Shechem longs for your daughter. Please give her to him in marriage. Make marriages with us, give your daughters to us, and take our daughters for yourselves. You shall live with us, and the land shall be open to you. Live and trade in it, and get property in it." Shechem also said to her father and to her brothers, "Let me find favor with you, and whatever you say to me, I will give. Put the marriage present and gift as high as you like, and I will give whatever you ask me. Only give me the young woman to be my wife."
All right. Now we remember that Old Testament law that we brought up initially. This is they're offering to fulfill an Old Testament law with a fair kind of they're going full tilt. Like it appears as though Hamer, at least, he's like, let's make this work out. Does he seem like he's trying to make it work out? There's for much as you can, an apology on his piece for such a thing.
Yeah,
Sure, it says, set the dowry as high as you want, and we're going to share everything together of this land.
And it was the fullness of a union of people in the midst of the whole thing. Like an offense has been made, but here is an offer for essentially union with their family in this place and a being at peace with everybody in the midst of it as well. And yeah, put the present as high as you would like. Does there seem to be, no matter what we know and feel with regards to how this all began, a desire from the young Shechem for Dinah that is at least appearing to be true?
Yeah.
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 And by the way, knowing what we know about Jacob, I think he would find this an offer he could hardly refuse.
And maybe, I mean, like for her in this time and place, it seems as if, I mean, if she, I mean, who knows what her agency is here, because how much have we heard from her?
Nothing.
nothing.
And yet there's a whole chapter devoted toward her story. And we don't know about it by and large, because while the Bible doesn't hide these stories, for some reason, those of us who read it, study it, and preach it do. And so why are we spending the time in a story where Dinah has no agency? Because the Bible won't let us forget it. And it's not justifying a thing, because I want you to notice real quick, how many times has God been mentioned in chapter 34 so far?
None.
None.
It's interesting what happens when the people of God stop mentioning God.
You forget about him?
But God will still tell the story of those who've been harmed
Yeah.
forever. And maybe it's time we start paying attention that they're there, instead of saying, well, that's terrible that it's there. It's terrible that it's still here. it's terrible that there was a whole thing where the majority of women would rather encounter while wandering in the woods a bear than a man. And in the midst of that, still, here's this thing where there seems to be this kid who he wants to marry her. That will become the Old Testament law. We've recognized the justice even if we don't find it just any longer. And so this seems to be something that might be okay. Well, let's see what happens. Anyone want to read 13 through 17?
I can read it. Because their sister Dinah had been defiled, Jacob's sons replied deceitfully as they spoke to Shechem and his father Hamor. They said to them, "We can't do such a thing. We can't give our sister to a man who is not circumcised. That would be a disgrace to us. We will give our consent to you on one condition only, that you become like us by circumcising all your males. Then
Sorry.
we will give you our daughters and take your daughters for ourselves. We'll settle among you and become one people with you. But if you will not agree to be circumcised, we'll take our sister and go."
All right. What again say does Dinah have in the whole thing?
None.
None.
How many words have we heard Jacob speak?
None.
Very few.
Oh. Oh, they went to talk to Jacob, but doesn't say what they said.
Yeah, Jacob hasn't said a word that's been recorded yet. How
Yeah.
many times have we heard God mentioned, or even the outrage of the sons bring up God?
None.
It was interesting that they said not being circumcised, we can't agree to that. It had nothing to do with the covenant.
No, but they're bringing up the covenant. Notice now that they are using their religion. And do we believe at all that they're using their religion to get something that their religion should be used for? And the answer is no, because
No.
the narrator tells us right away that they are going to be dealing deceitfully with Hamor and Shechem here. And then they use their religion to do it. Oh, I know this has never happened in the history of the world ever.
Yeah.
And again, the story is here. But this is not a story of something that's glorious, right? Like, this is not being painted out as something that's glorious. It's a story of inglorious realities and broken people who are utilizing things for their own advantage. And we're hearing it. And if it makes us feel like, God, you know, like after all this time, couldn't you have done better? Even though we don't see God once, and then in some kind of respect, they've abandoned God, and it starts to feel a little judgy right here. Right before this chapter, there was still an altar erected by or for God. So at least the beginning is bookended by God. And I don't know if that'll make any difference. All right. Does anyone want to go verses 18 through, we're going to go all the way through 24.
I will.
Thank you.
Be happy to get back over it.
She's walking back into the kitchen.
Oh, well, it's all very good.
18 through 24.
Yeah.
Their words pleased Hamor and Hamor's son Shechem. And the young man did not delay to do the thing because he was delighted with Jacob's daughter. Now he was the most honored of all of his family. So
And
Ham-
remember, Shechem means most honored. So
Right.
again, you're playing with words there.
right. So Hamor and his son Shechem came to the gate of their city and spoke to the men of the city, saying, "These people are friendly with us. Let them live in the land and trade in it, for the land is large enough for them. Let them take their daughters in marriage, and let us give them our daughters. Only on this condition will they agree to live among us, to become one people, that every male among us be circumcised as they are circumcised. Will not their livestock, their property, and all their animals be ours? Only let us agree with them, and they will live among us." And all who went out of the city gate heeded Hamor and his son Shechem, and every male was circumcised, all who went out of the gate of his city.
Wow. I mean, I'll say this about Hammer there. He must have a rousing way of speaking to convince them all to do that. In Shechem there, he goes for most honored. Like, notice the way that they're talking about these things. Do they seem genuinely excited by this union?
Yeah,
Yeah. Like, and they're saying, like, this will be good for us. No, we have to join with their customs. So, like, like, how does so much of religion get kind of passed on? Here's some customs that you do, and then you'll kind of get involved in it later. Well, what's the custom? You got to get circumcised. That sounds okay. and that'll work. I mean, but that is the sign. That is the ritual. That is the version of baptism in the Old Testament, if you will. Like, it is the sign and seal of belonging to something, and they're using their religion, saying, you have to belong to us. If we're going to give you our sister. Now, again, where's Jacob? Who knows? He's just starting to be quiet.
So, had this not been done deceitfully, would this essentially be Hamor's group essentially agreeing to become Jewish?
In some kind of respect, absolutely. Like,
Isn't there deceit on both sides based on won't their livestock and their property and all their other animals become ours?
that certainly is the foundation of their desire, is economics. Now, become ours. Well, if they become one, they become ours. It's kind of morphed into the whole thing. They're not trying to rid of the whole, but yeah, they certainly want the stuff. Because how wealthy was Jacob, apparently?
Very.
Fairly.
He's fairly wealthy. I mean, he's paying for land and outright money, whatever that money is. He's just got money. And then he's got all this other stuff to boot. And his family is offering peace, and he's a rich guy, and they'll intermarry, and this is good for us, and it's good for our economic situation. And yeah, we should just do this. And all the guys are like, sweet, let's do it.
Yeah.
Has anything in this story not sounded a little bit like reality? Not like all the pieces like in one single line, but in the ways how the world works. Religion offered deceitfully with pieces of things, people kind of going with it because, hey, it might be all right. And who knows how it might actually work out the best for us. Simultaneously, the ways in which promises are made between people and how things happen, all of this seems like it's just kind of one kind of cluster that works really well with the way the world often feels.
Yeah. It sounds like a business to me. You give me this and
And yet in the midst of this, you do have young Shechem who, like, he did not start off positive. There's no positive person in the story except Dinah, and but we don't know anything about Dinah other than we have no sense of if she's happy with any of this, but certainly Shechem's happy with it. And you have to hope that if he's happy with it, maybe he'll treat her well.
by the way, this giant love of Shechem for Dinah, I mean, doesn't it echo Jacob's love for,
Ra-
yeah, Rachel. I mean, Jacob
And
was-
even Isaac's love for Rebecca. In fact, some of the language used for Shechem's love for Dinah is the same language used for Jacob's love for Rachel and Isaac's love for Rebecca. And it's good to see that because that's not unintentionally done by the final editor of Genesis. She might be getting something here that for her situation, however terrible, is a decent way out, a happy conclusion.
well, she's going to marry the firstborn son, the honored one of this whole other kingdom.
It's like she becomes a queen.
And here is a way. How there are two ways to conquer your enemies, are there not?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
One way is to destroy them, and one way is to make them friends. And have you ever found that destroying your enemies works very well in the history of the world, the history of the Bible, the history of your very own life?
No,
I mean, you know how long I tried to destroy my neuroses until I decided to try to make them friends? Totally helped out, by the way.
Yeah.
Like it's the way of things. And here's a moment that you see a powerful group of people go in. Your son does something so colossally stupid, you probably wanted to beat him. And he's like, but I think I love her. And he's like, oh my God. Okay, let's go try to rectify this situation. Goes up to this powerful guy who's come with money, and he just kind of is silent until the sons show up, who are visibly angry and say, and here's like, hey, I'm gonna give you guys everything. Set the bar as high as you want. Let's make this work out. I want peace. And the brothers are like, well, we can never marry her off to a guy who's uncircumcised. So unless not just him, but him, you, and not just your family, but literally all of your people. And if all of your people become us, then we'll work that out. And Shechem, the prince, who's the king to be, is beside himself happy. He's like, oh, you mean I only need to get everybody circumcised and I get to be married to her? This is
By the way, this could have easily dissolved into total warfare.
It could have. But it could also turn into something else. And so I'll finish the chapter just so we might see how it turns out, and we can take a little bit longer looking at it. On the third day, and you might be liking the third day, like the resurrection. No, the third day of circumcision, when they were still in pain.
Yes.
Two of the sons of Jacob, Simeon and Levi. Why are their names important? Anybody remember where Simeon and Levi are in the birth order?
Second and third, I think.
And the first is
Reuben.
who we'll see what happens to Reuben later. And Simeon and Levi and Reuben, in fact, are all children of which wife/concubine?
Leah.
Leah.
Leah, who is also the daughter of Jacob with Dinah, that is. Who's Dinah's mom?
Leah.
Leah.
Yeah. So this is two of Leah's full-blood brothers, but not the firstborn. Took their swords and came against the city unawares and killed all the males.
Oh, dear.
Mm.
So they showed up like ninjas and killed all of them.
Wow.
They killed Hamor and his son Shechem with the sword and took Dinah out of Shechem's house and went away. Notice how that is written. And took Dinah out of Shechem's house and went away. Does it sound at all like, one, again, she had any agency, or two, that she even wanted to leave?
Right.
No.
I mean, they've kind of screwed her over, haven't they? Because she's now no longer a virgin and now her husband is dead.
Um, that's one way of putting it. Yeah, like she's been raped, she gets a husband and a whole huge dowry and this kind of sense of a promise of things. Now her husband is dead, and she's been, as all of the males in the place where she was going to be queen, and she's taken out by her brothers who are in a rage. And why are they in a rage? Because of what happened to her, or because they feel like their honor was taken because of, quote, her defilement. Because you remember how something unclean in a group makes everything unclean in the legality of things? Sometimes people take that too far when they start treating people like objects.
Wow.
Verse 27. And the other sons of the house of Jacob came upon the slain and plundered the city because their sister had been defiled. They took their flocks and their herds, their donkeys, and whatever was in the city and the field, all their wealth, all their little ones, their wives, all that was in the houses they captured and made their prey.
So they turned around and did the exact same thing, only in spades. I mean, every woman.
Hey, I mean, they killed all the men. But they take all the children. They apparently rape all the women. They take everything that's there. The sons of Jacob. How many times have we heard Jacob speak?
None.
How many times have we heard God mentioned?
None. They sound a little bit like Jacob in a way,
Oh, you know.
like father, like son.
But Jacob, this is on a level that Jacob would.
Yeah, I don't think Jacob's ever done anything this bad, at least
No.
so far.
But
He's a scoundrel, but he's not this guy. Notice.
And by the way, Jacob was willing to live in the foreign culture until he had accrued, even by hook or crook, his fortune. And actually was, I mean, he was dishonest, but he actually stayed for how many years?
Who is the one that seems to have had the best relationship with the people who were the inhabitants of the land of Canaan?
Isaac?
Isaac.
oh,
And Isaac's wasn't a very good relationship. They kept filling in his wells. They kept driving him off his land. He just kept saying, I'll go somewhere else and let's be at peace. Now, Abraham, he had some issues. He got into a little scuffle, war. You might remember that. Helped save Lot, take care of some things. He was kind of a warrior type, not Isaac. He just did this thing. Now, Jacob, he's a scoundrel, but he's no warrior.
Right.
But apparently his sons, they don't like to, this is a completely disproportionate response toward anything. And talk about defilement. They have defiled their religion because they used their religion deceitfully. This is breaking the commandment to not use the name of the Lord your God in vain. And they might have tried not mentioning God at all, but just the ritual to try to keep them out of that whole mess anyway. But notice the way they use religion for the sake of violence. And because God isn't mentioned at all, we know they're only using religion to further their own ends, because there is plenty of people who can get an A in religion, an A in Bible, and completely fail Christianity. And they did the same thing to all the women. Then Jacob said to Simeon and Levi, and before we talk about what Jacob finally said, I want you to remember that at the end of Genesis, in Genesis 49, Jacob essentially disinherits them with his final kind of thing. And Simeon is a tribe that rarely had land and was actually kind of absorbed by Judah. And Levi is a tribe that never had land because they were the priestly ones. And these are two sons who are essentially wiped clean away in the long term. You have brought trouble on me by making me odious to the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites and the Perizzites. My numbers are few, and if they gather themselves against me and attack me, I shall be destroyed, both I and my household. But they said, should our sister be treated like a whore?
Like what?
I don't think they cared whether their sister was treated like a prostitute.
No, they didn't, did they?
No.
That's the end of the chapter. Have we ever heard that read in church and said, the word of the Lord? And everyone's like, thanks be to God.
They killed all the males.
Yeah.
And they raped all the women.
Is Garrett, is any of this stuff in the lectionary?
No.
That's what I thought.
No. There are some things that just never grace the lectionary, and this is one of them. How often have you heard this passage read?
Never.
How many? I'm assuming some of you have read it, but this is one that you've read, and you were probably like, "I'll move on to the next chapter." I'm forcing us to spend an hour sitting with her story because her story needs to be told and it cannot be run from, because there are other stories like hers that are happening in our world right now that cannot hide or run from. There are stories like hers that are throughout history that people do not want to hear, so they do not have to hear that it still goes on, and we need to live in a world where such things are not covered up. And Genesis refuses to cover it up, even if our lectionary happily does, because it assumes there is no way that people can truly teach or preach on this in a way that anybody wants to listen to. Now, Jacob, when he says everything, notice he's also only talking about himself, even though he uses himself as the fullness of his household. But he says, you've brought trouble on me by making me odious. I love that word. Odious. You know, I heard today, I don't know if it's true, because everything you read on the internet, you shouldn't believe. I saw Abraham Lincoln said that. That they have been able suddenly to figure out how to communicate scent over distances. So now we have sight and we have hearing, but we haven't developed taste or feeling yet. Well, apparently they've figured out something that you can send like scent through something, so you can smell like your cooking shows in the future, which I think will be terrible. Like just only make me hungry and more bitter. But nevertheless, I had a point to any of that. Odious, that's right.
Mine says stench.
Stench.
Yeah.
He is something that people don't want to be around. Here was a moment for them to live peaceably
Yeah.
People are like, why is this in the Bible? Is this any way the people of God should act?
No,
No,
Nope.
No. And how many times did they bring God into their actions?
none.
Once.
Oh,
And the joy of them not bringing God into their actions once is the worst things that we often see in the Bible. God isn't a part of it at all. And when God is a part of it, God is often named by another as supporting it, but we don't actually see God in it. And that's still true. Now, Israel, Jacob saying, you've made me odious. Because one, what happens now if they attack him because they no longer want him near?
Who attacks? The women? The children? There's so
Other
many.
communities that are near. He took out one community, but there are others.
Okay.
There are like they do things, and like there are people like, and no one's fallen for that again.
No.
I mean, this is like the worst Trojan horse story I've ever heard. And he recognizes that they, in their act of violence and in their use of using their religion to commit their acts of violence, have made the promise now tenuous. Here is a guy who has put up altars and believes that God will do something. He has wrestled with God. Now, does he always think that it'll work out the way he wants? No.
no.
But suddenly he recognizes that his son's actions have made the promise itself tenuous. And there's a question that we have to just, again, when he says this to his sons, notice that his son's response is, again, should our sister be treated like a whore? Now, we're privy to the Old Testament laws and seeing that while she was this kind of way, there was a justice that was maybe in here. And I think, as Leslie, you said right away after hearing that question uttered, who is the one treating her like a prostitute?
The brothers. Well, not exactly right. Yeah,
Like,
because the guy was going to marry her.
he was going to marry her. He seemed happy as a clam. Things
Yeah.
were moving in that kind of thing. She may or may not have been happy. We don't get to hear her agency. And there's got to be a piece. What was the only thing we know of her agency in the whole story?
That she wanted to go visit the other women.
And she wanted to have friends.
Friends, yeah.
How dangerous is this world for women?
Very.
That the only agency that she had was wanting to have friends. And her life goes from moment to maybe another decent, who knows, to where now she is just the use that her brothers have for dealing with their own sense of the injustice done to them because of what happened to her. And in that quest for vengeance, for their own honor or whatever else, they respond in a fashion that is altogether wrong. And this is the people of promise. And the Bible is not justifying it. It is, in fact, condemning it, but it is not running from it either. What is it like that the ancient stories of the people of Israel include their own propensity for genocidal insanity?
Hitler.
But if Jacob's name has been made odious by this, How often is Jesus' name made odious by Christians?
A lot.
How many people have left Christ behind because Christ emissaries we have like 11 minutes and I could kind of go more, but this is a heavy kind of thing and I don't need to to go deep into it, but there's plenty there.
Think about, I mean, it's almost the same business. You know, you've got the horrible killing and you've got the economic gain. That the entire crusade was like this.
How much of the world is still like this today?
Yeah.
A lot of it.
What's Gaza
Most
like?
of it, all of it.
Well, look how we talk about the developing world. We need them developing essentially so that we can keep getting their stuff. Why are they developing? The ways we go about things apparently hasn't changed that much over the years, and the ways we use our religion to justify what we do still hasn't changed over the years. And here's a little story again where God isn't mentioned in Jacob's name and household, the name Israel, the one who is blessed or struggles with God, is stained, is stenchy, stanky, stinky, odious mess now because of what they've done, where the very promise of the future of the promise is now put into question in Jacob's mind, at least. Now, when we get into the next chapter, we see another moment when God is there. This story is bookended with God, but this chapter doesn't mention God. And it's a real story, and it's a painful story, and her story needs to be told. Because how often have we heard about the 12 sons of Jacob? The 12 tribes of Israel.
Israel, yeah.
How many daughters did he have?
Only
Yes.
one that we know of.
Only one that we know of, and we
Of,
give her
yeah.
name too. And the first story of any of his children, where one of them is the main character, is hers. That's remarkable. The first story of his children is a story of his daughter in a world that is wrong, and her story is told in all of its gory terribleness so that we can't run away from it. You remember how there is that part at the end of the sacrifice of Jephthah's daughter?
No.
That's mentioned where the daughters of Israel still go out each year for a period of time to mourn the daughter of Jephthah. And we see that and we're like, what an odd and terrible thing in the midst of a terrible and terrifying story. And the Bible is one that moves these stories to the top of our consciousness. It does not deny the stories. It does not get rid of the ugliness. It forces us to confront them and to acknowledge within our religious tradition and history are examples of people who have failed tremendously, not so that we might lift them up as heroes, but that we might learn from them, repent with them, and attempt to change ourselves, because there is a reason the first story of any of Jacob's children is his daughter who is treated like this. Her story is silenced by her brothers.
I'm surprised they did that when they had a bargain.
They never had a bargain. They just wanted to get even.
Yeah,
That just surprises me because it sounded like everything was gonna work out.
Well, it did for a moment. Like, that's the interesting part of the story, right? Didn't it sound like for a moment, like, well, this is a terrible, tragic beginning, but maybe it'll work out? We start with Jacob entering the promised land, having the wealth to buy things, and then immediately it takes a downturn. It looks like it might go back, but his sons, in one violent swoop, remind us what Jesus said in the Gospels is true. Those who live by the sword will
Will
die
die
by the sword. This is a story of violence begets violence.
Yeah.
This is a story of what happens when there is no moment of forgiveness or grace or mercy or all the things that Jesus teaches us is true. This is a story where even if it starts in ways that don't make a lick of sense to us in terms of how it could ever move toward love, the word love for Shechem's feelings towards Dinah is given 4 separate times. It is as if you cannot deny at least his affection, even if, again, we can judge everything about him before the ways he's having this affection, and even after. I mean, I'm not justifying any of it, but the idea, at least in the narrator's mind, is that his affection is genuine and true. And even if her agency is taken away, we know from the Old Testament laws that this is the way that was intended to be for the justice of the woman involved. Now we also know that these guys are going to use their religion not for the justice that it demands, but in a ways to get their own sense of vengeance, which reminds us that something is always true. And I'll say it again. Be careful how people quote the Bible so they can get a way that they think is right if they are not doing the right thing. And the right thing endlessly gets to be the way of Jesus. And this is why he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and nothing else leads to the Father but through me. Because the way in which he lives, the truth that he embodies, the life of justice and love and peace, the ways in which he embraces things, forgives, allows people to, and again, those things that I cannot stand, and I'm sure I've said this enough times before. I don't like when I see how Christians will write something about how Jesus loves the sinner, but like he won't keep him a sinner. You know how he ate with sinners, but he transformed him. And I'm like, there's no story of Jesus in the Gospels where he sits with sinners and starts talking about how much of a sinner they are and how terrible they are. And suddenly they're like, you know what? Jesus, you're right. It's finally you that changed me because you're just so right. No, Jesus would sit with people and they would see him and he would see them. And yes, they would transform. But why?
because they saw him love them.
Because he saw them as they are, that they never believed themselves to be. Not just worthy of love, but they themselves are worth and love. And when you see someone who looks at you and suddenly you know with every fiber of your being how glorious you really are, that changes you. Not a religion that is violent, not a way of trying to exact retribution, not a way of taking God out so you can talk about your religion. That just makes it an idol. That just makes it something violent. And we can say when people complain and condemn Christianity for its history of violence, I condemn the history of my tradition's violence with you.
And yet it seems like the counterpoint is the word pride, because if there's anything that seems to be the betrayal of the people of Israel, it's their pride that basically foments the story.
Keith, I'm with you on that one. It is pride. Like, and what is the opposite there of pride is humility. And what, again, are we reminded in Micah 6:8 and by the very example of Jesus himself? Humility.
Shechem was humble.
What's that?
Shechem was humble.
Mm-hmm. I mean, he felt most honored by having Dinah, and maybe he had some issues, but he was willing the humility of going through that process to get her. Meanwhile, again, they used the primary ritual of inclusion in their tradition, their faith,
Yeah,
to kill.
And this could have been a story about redemption, but we were robbed of that because the sons of Israel decided not to.
They decided pride was more important.
And it leads to Jacob and his feeling of what he believes of the promise. They have called it into question. Now we know that there's a lot more of the Bible left. And so God is still up to something, even in the midst of people being their worst. And that's also important. And we can't leave without saying that. Because we might look at a story like this and say, yes, this is so much of the world. It's just wrong. But this isn't the final chapter of Genesis. It's not the final book in the Bible. And it's not the end of the story. And neither is any other moment that is filled with injustice. Because even if God is never mentioned and religion is used poorly, God is still at work. And we might fear that we have done too much to make God do anything. But isn't that the great surprise of a child like Isaac, of a morning called Easter, of a God like ours? Somehow in the midst of this, we can keep the faith, but we can learn the lesson. Don't deny the stories of the people harmed by us, and learn to be better by fulfilling the honest embrace of what we believe. So I hope you don't forget the story of Dinah, even though it's not an easy story to hear.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Or we can have one of those moments when we're like, it really was almost within an hour.
I don't think I've ever read it.
No, I've never read through this either.
Yeah.
Many times.
And whether you've read it many times or seen it for the first time, I hope that this time we can honor her a little bit better than she's been honored so far.
yeah.
Let's pray. God, for stories we don't want to hear, but we must. Well, we give you thanks. And we give you thanks that we are forced to hear them in what we call your word. And so may we hear this and realize that when we are called, this is the word of the Lord, that when we say thanks be to God, it is not out of gratitude for something that's glorious and good and makes us feel better, but because you force us to see what we would rather wash and wish away, so that we might do better than our ancestors have done. And by your grace, and in the name of Jesus, who is the Christ, we ask that it may be so. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you for your time, y'all.
Thank you, Garrett.
Yeah.
Garrett.
We'll be here next week, and it'll be, I'd love to say it'll be better.
It'll be honest.
I can't promise. And thank God, it's like how I feel about some of the world this year. So like,
Yeah.
maybe it's just a lesson. But thank you all for your time. Have a beautiful night. And
Thank you.
You too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.